All the excitement that I've got from this color work disappeared right after I washed and blocked the sweater. The yoke of the sweater stretched a lot. There was no way I could wear the sweater. I had really only two choices. The first one, to get rid of the sweater, and the second one, to go ahead and make changes and make it wearable. Yes, my sweater looked hopeless and shapeless, and I was thinking, what can I do to make it work? I knew to fix the problem, I needed to decrease the distance between the underarms and the neckband. So I had to cut out the collar and partially the yoke right before the collar work. That would give me a starting point for the new neckband, I thought. So I slept on it, and the next morning I took the scissors, prayed for a success, and cut the whole piece out. Okay, after I did the cut, it was really challenging to find the thread that would unravel for me. Finally, it happened. I was able to pick up all the live stitches on smaller size needles. I went down quite a bit from 325 millimeters needles, which is US size 3, to 225 millimeters needles, which is US size 1. What I did right away, right on the first round, I decreased the number of stitches a lot. I went knit 1, knit 2 together all the way across the round. Then, using this amount of stitches, I did a short row shaping in the back, just to lengthen the back for a more comfortable wear. And hooray! Look what I've got! After all the changes I did, I've got quite a new look to the sweater. I've got ruffles at the top of the sweater. New design, which I really liked. Here is the short rows at the back, the short row shaping for the back. Now that I was satisfied with how the top of the sweater turned out, I wanted to work on the bottom of the sweater, on the ribbing. I decided to rip out the ribbing and do the split ribbing. But before going into that, let's talk a little bit in details about the neckband. So remember, after I cut the piece out, I decreased the number of stitches rapidly, but still I've got lots of stitches left. I needed another massive decrease of stitches, but instead I chose to go for double stockinette, or it's also called double-sided 1x1 rib stitch pattern. The double stockinette makes a double layer of fabric at a much denser gauge than a stockinette stitch. It looks identical on both sides. It looks like a stockinette stitch on both sides. It's also thick and squishy. It pulls the fabric in, just exactly what I needed. Now, how to knit the stitch in the round. There is a setup round, which is 1x1 rib. I did one round of 1x1 ribbing, and then the actual pattern is 2 rounds, 2 stitches, repeat stitch pattern. Round 1. Knit 1, slip 1 with the yarn in front. Repeat these 2 stitches across the round. You knit the knits and slip the purls with the yarn in front. Round 2. Slip 1 with the yarn in the back and purl 1. Repeat these 2 stitches all across the round. You slip the knits with the yarn in the back and purl the purls, and then repeat the 2 rounds for the pattern. To bind off the neckband, I've used the Tubular Invisible 1x1 rib sewn bind off, which I have the detailed video for on my YouTube channel. Please check it out. Tubular Invisible 1x1 rib sewn bind off. I'm going to talk briefly about this bind off right here. It's a 4 steps bind off, and you work with 4 stitches at a time. Knit, purl, knit, purl. First you work with knit stitches and then with purl stitches. Once you get a hang of the technique, you might be able to combine steps 1 and 2 into a single movement and steps 3 and 4 into another single movement. So I've combined mine here. Step 1. Insert the needle knitwise into the first knit stitch and slip it off. skip the purl and go in purlwise into the second knit stitch and leave it on. Step 2, insert the needle purlwise into the first purl stitch and slip it off, and then go from back to front between the 2 stitches and insert the needle knitwise into the second stitch, which is the purl stitch, and leave it on. Please check the other video for the details on my YouTube channel, as I've already mentioned. Now it's time to move to the bottom of the sweater and make changes on the ribbing. My scissors have already worked very well for me once, so I'm using them again. I did the Kitchener grafting when I did the ribbing for the first time, when I bound off the ribbing for the first time, and it's not really fun to rip out the Kitchener stitch, so my choice was the scissors. I'm cutting the very edge of the bind off. I'm having fun here, as you can tell. Having fun unraveling. It goes so easy, no problem. And winding into the ball. Then I picked up the live stitches and using smaller needles, smaller than I used on the body. I used the 325 millimeters on the body and using the 225 millimeters on the ribbing. I knit the back and the front of the 2x2 ribbon separately. The ribbon is not seamed at the sides. And the back is about 1.5 inches longer than the front. To bind off the ribbing, again I grafted the stitches using the Kitchener stitch, which formed the tubular bind off edge, and I'm going to go into the details on it when I work on the cuffs of the sleeves. And here I am in the sweater with all the changes I've done to it. I do enjoy it, and I'm really happy about how it turned out. Really happy about I could keep the color work untouched and just work around doing little adjustments and changes and really make it work. The only part of the sweater that I still have to work on is the cuffs of the sleeves. And from 4 inches length, I went to 8 inches. So I could roll the cuffs of the sleeves up or wear them down comfortably, whatever I feel like. My scissors are handy again, and I am cutting the bind off edge of the cuffs of the sleeves. And again, having fun unraveling. After this, I'll have lots of live stitches to pick up. And picking up stitches right now, and I'm thinking that the most important thing right now is to get all the stitches onto the needle. I don't want to drop stitches. And I'm not worried about the orientation of the stitches right now. I'm just picking them carefully so they are all on the needle, and I will be able to fix the orientation of the stitches, the mount of the stitches on my next round. Okay, here I am at the beginning of the round, and I've got the pearls at the beginning of the round. I'm gonna move them to the back as soon as I work them, because I like to have the knit stitches at the beginning of my rounds. So this is the round I am reorienting the stitches. Once everything is back on the needles, I am knitting and purling the way the stitches do not get twisted. So here is a closer look. You can see how I work the stitches, and some of them get worked through the back loop and some through the front loop, depending on how they are positioned on the needle. And I am on the next round where all the stitches have been reoriented and positioned the way they are supposed to be. I'm working the cuff of the sleeve in the round using the magic loop technique and just knitting away and getting 8 inches of length for this cuff of the sleeve done. The bind off, finally! I will need the second set of needles for grafting here, and I will move all my knit stitches onto a spare needle. And for the pearls, I will use the original needle, which I'm getting from the back. It's going to be a tubular bind off using the Kitchener graft. The tubular because it forms a tube. And for the Kitchener graft, the stitches of the 2x2 ribbing should be arranged on 2 needles, the knit stitches on the front needle and the purl stitches on the back needle. That's what I am doing right now. Okay, the stitches are separated now and they are on 2 circular needles. That's how they look like. And the number of stitches should be the same on each needle. And I've got 26 stitches on one needle and 26 on the other. For this bind off, I will need a long tail, and I'm leaving the tail 4 times the length of the finished edge. I'm breaking the yarn and threading the yarn into a tapestry needle. That's how the bind off is gonna look like when it's done. It's a very nice bind off, smooth and strong. It doesn't form any edge, seem to roll over the edge to the other side. It's as I said, very nice, rounded and very stretchy elastic bind off. I'm doing this bind off in the round, that's why I'm going to start working on it right away without any preparation or any kind of a setup. First I will mark the stitches, the first stitch on the front needle. And the first stitch on the back needle, and for that I am using the back so it's easier to attach the marker so the marker doesn't get in the way. And I'm marking those stitches so that I can use them at the end to complete the round, to join the bind off in the round smoothly. Working on circular needles and small circumference. What is that? Right, the magic loop. That's exactly what I am using here. Alright, I'm getting ready for the actual bind off. So my stitches are arranged onto needles and the purl sides of the stitches are facing each other and the points of the needles are to the right and the working yarn comes from the back. And I'm going to insert the tapestry needle knitwise into the first knit stitch and slip it off. Now inserting the tapestry needle into the second knit stitch on the front needle and leave it on. Moving on to the back needle, purlwise into the first purl stitch and slip it off. Right away knitwise into the second purl stitch on the back needle and leave it on. As you noticed, I worked the 2 stitches from the front needle and then the 2 stitches from the back needle. I will use the rules of 2's here. And also, once you work the stitch twice, you will pull it off the needle. So I'm going to start all over. Knit 1, slip off, purl the second stitch on the front needle, leave it on. Going on to the back needle, purlwise, slip off, knitwise, leave on. It's very important to keep the working yarn under the needles and start all over. Knitwise into the first knit stitch on the front needle and slip it off. Purlwise into the second stitch on the front needle and leave it on. Purlwise into the first purl stitch on the back needle, slip it off. Knitwise into the second purl stitch on the back needle and leave it on. Knitwise and slip it off, purlwise and leave it on. You can see the bind off forming. I love this bind off. Oops, what are you doing here? Yeah, you have already done the stitches from the front needle. Yep. Go back, unravel. I've got distracted here. Actually, it's very helpful to watch the position of the working yarn between the steps. When the working yarn comes from the back needle, from the back, it's time to work the stitches from the front needle. But this time it came from the front, so I'm gonna move in the opposite direction and work my stitches from the back needle. And once more, knitwise into the first stitch on the front needle and slip it off, and purlwise into the second stitch on the front needle and leave it on, and vice versa, purlwise into the first stitch on the back needle and slip it off, and knitwise into the second stitch on the back needle and leave it on. Repeat the steps all across the round until all the stitches have been worked twice. And adjust your tension as you go, making sure you don't pull too tight or leaving it too loose. I'm almost at the end here. I'm at the very end here, and I've got 2 stitches on the front and 2 stitches on the back. And when I go through the steps, I'll have 1 stitch left on each needle. And these stitches have been worked only twice, only once. So I need pairs for the stitches. So I'm gonna move the cables to the other end of the needles and get the stitches that I marked at the beginning of the bind off. Oops, I am slightly off camera here. I'm sorry. Moving back again to the other side of the needles so I can work the stitches for the second time. And finally let them go off the needles so the round is completed. Okay, taking the markers off. And voila, it's done.